Okay, everybody, welcome to the webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is a free 6-week series where you have behind the scenes in social media. And this is a special presentation just for those who are working in advocacy, nonprofits, anyone working in community organizations. If you have any questions about any other types of organizations, please feel free to contact me or email me. My name is Marie Smith. I am the co-founder of Legal Advocacy Project. I'm also a social media specialist and a data analyst. My focus is on helping people understand data and help people understand how to most effectively use social media platforms to achieve their goals. So kind of making common sense out of all this technical stuff is what I love to do, and helping people understand how to reach their goals most effectively. And so we're going to go ahead and review the series, and then we'll get started. So the first part of the series is that we're going to learn first about Twitter. And the reason why we start with Twitter on week 1 is because Twitter functionally has the most open platform for recruiting traffic. And what that means is that Twitter is designed for people to connect quickly and effectively. So we're starting with Twitter because it's the easiest to determine results. Then week 2, we're going to focus on Facebook, which is how to develop community and host events on Facebook. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with event pages, but this is more than about event pages. This is more about how to develop an active, useful group. People who are doing things, talking to each other, who want to connect, who want to be a part of something, and that something is the campaigns that you run. Week 3, we're focused on Pinterest. Some people don't even know what Pinterest is. It is really a type of vision board. It's a digital vision board. So Pinterest is really effective for inspiration, is effective for ideas, is effective to highlight a visual story of the types of communities that you're trying to develop or help. So it gives people another viewpoint other than words, other than events. It gives them an idea of what they aspire to be. So it's an important tool outside of just telling people what you want out of them and what you want them to participate in. It gives people kind of a levity, a positive influence, and a positive way to participate in your community without investing a lot of time and energy. Week 4, we're going to focus on Instagram, and Instagram is really a great documentation tool. As a side note, we'll talk about Snapchat as well. Both of these tools focus on saying where you've been and what you've done is really what people do with these 2 tools. So in terms of engaging what has happened outside of posting pictures on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram is actually more effective in terms of putting together a real record of what it is that you do in the real world. Week 5, we're going to focus on crowdfunding. And crowdfunding is a whole topic. There are now tons of organizations that specialize in crowdfunding. We'll talk about those. There are portals around crowdfunding, and there are trends to follow. Once you have, pardon me, once you have some data to put together a campaign, and you've measured that campaign, and we're going to talk about measurements from today on forward, then you can really create a compelling story to raise funds from the public and from nonprofit donors, from investors, to put together the types of initiatives you want to put together in your organization. And then lastly, on week 6, we're going to deal with data. All of these initiatives from week 1 to week 5 yield data. That data needs to be managed. And so there are tools to do that. There are people you can work with, including myself, to do that. There are lots of different ways to handle that. And so, we're going to build up to that conversation because each platform yields a certain amount of data that's going to give you the opportunity to participate in different kinds of fundraising events, different kinds of initiatives, different kinds of sales, different kinds of launches. There's a lot of opportunity once you have the data that you need to participate in things. Okay, so we have a question before we get started. This is from Jackie. Are all these features that you have delineated come together to make something like the Platform Nation Builder? Yes. There are aggregate platforms out there like Nation Builder. However, this is closer to what's called data management. And so, you can use Nation Builder to put together the right types of campaigns, but it's kind of, it's not as customizable as what I'm going to talk about today. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And so Twitter. So the rule in social media is that everything is everything, meaning that all of these platforms are connected and they mean something to each other. So I'm sure that all of you are familiar with websites. You've all developed websites. You've all participated in websites. Pardon me. And with these websites, you develop words. You develop words to discover how you want to help your audience. So with Legal Advocacy Project, we obviously did this. We described what we do, our mission, how we help people, and what type of team members we're looking for to be involved in the project. All of these words essentially create what are called targets. And so once you know what you do and who you want to reach, then we need to develop how to create the best outreach for your initiative. So with that, we have a basic methodology, and that methodology is called quantity, not quality. So essentially, the number one mistake that people make is when they're doing campaigns, whether they're corporate campaigns or nonprofit campaigns or advocate campaigns, is that we are essentially putting together not just a lot of traffic and kind of hoping and praying. We're putting together an actual effective campaign. And so the biggest thing we want is we want to make sure that everybody is clear on what you want them to do. So one of the things that we did when we put together campaigns for Legal Advocacy Project, we started to look at how do we really, what are the different buckets we want to fill. So in this methodology, we're focused on for 7 key objectives. And so we're going to illustrate those objectives today in the webinar. So the first objective is that you know your audience from the start. And so one of the best things you can do is kind of do your homework. You know your audience from interacting with them, but online there's a different set of places and spaces that your audience interacts in, and your job is to keep up with those and sort of find out where they roam so that you can effectively recruit them and make campaigns. Behind the scenes, which is what the focus is today, is that you need tools and data to measure your success. So, you know, some of you may be familiar with Google Analytics or other initiatives or other types of analytics. However, those tools, they only give you what's called a first level analysis. So we're looking at other types of what are called targeting. So this is very, very common in corporate America when they measure their successes. Not so common with nonprofits and advocates, which is why we're doing this webinar today. From those targets, you want to create your priorities, and then from the priorities, you want to convert your audience or your audiences so you can reach your goals. And then you repeat the cycle and create multiple campaigns. So next, we're going to focus on how do you get to step one, because a lot of this can be overwhelming and it can be confusing. And so what we're focused on is making sure you really get your audience in an intimate way online. So as I mentioned before, there's a big difference between who your audience is in the real world and who they are online. And the reason there is because people tend to create multiple personalities online. People tend to feel braver online, and they tend to speak about interests that they normally wouldn't speak about in the real world. So one is your audience is probably bigger than you think it is. Two is only a certain percentage of people are going to interact with you in the real world, whereas there might be a bigger audience that will interact with you online or become interested online and get brave enough to interact with you in the real world. So the key is to search for the best opportunities to do outreach and to talk to people where they feel most comfortable, which is in their homes, in their facilities that they work in their organizations, you know, where they're just living their daily lives. So we want to make sure that we really get how that works. We also want to get clear on, you know, do they frequent certain sites? Do they frequent certain blogs? Do they have a certain cultural identity? Do they have multiple cultural identities? And then lastly, we want to figure out who their authorities are. So as an example, I'm going to use our project. And we're going to take a look at Twitter, today's subject. And so with Twitter, the biggest thing is, what's wonderful about Twitter is that you can manage something called lists. And so we can talk about traffic building a bit, but today we're really going to focus on once you have your traffic and you have some followers, then you know you want to start building out lists and contacts. So just like you have a database, some of you may be using, for example, Salsa Lab CRM, or you might be using just a plain Outlook contact list. You might be using a database. All these different things are akin to what a Twitter list is. So these are ways to make notes on who it is that you're trying to reach and why. So you can see with our project, we have a list set up for the different contacts that have become followers or people that we're interested in following, or there's a mutual following. With our project, we have certain groups that we target. So pardon me, we focus on nonprofit agencies. SLS Codex stands for Stanford Law School, which has some interesting ways for us to track the groups that we advocate for, those who have social developmental disorders, because we are focused on a legal informatics system, which means a case management system. We just participated in an event called Quest for Democracy. So those are some of the people and senators and assembly members that we lobby to or are aware of because of that initiative. Because we're focused on a technology-based solution, we have technologists in our list. Obviously, we have media. We have change agents. These are, for example, regular citizens or media or politicians who are more active, who tend to be more vocal on Twitter, that we can effectively look at and kind of see where people are and what's there. So with List on Twitter, you can see that we have a feed that's just the change agent. So it filters out all of the other noise in our 600 plus followers just to those 130 members that we've identified as very active on Twitter and very much talking about different things that are interesting to our audience, which are those who have been participating in the criminal justice system or in the social services system. So with each of these, or they're advocates of some sort, with each of these, this is how we kind of keep up with what's happening with our audience, why they're doing what they're doing, and how we can connect with them. How do our interests overlap with their interests? The other thing we follow is we have leaders. In Twitter, you have the ability to do both what's called a public list and a private list. So a public list is a list that we focus on where anybody can follow it and anybody can do it. But a private list is where we have we're not wanting to share our objectives with the public. So in our particular leader list, these are people that we intend to call on for certain objectives or for certain things that we want to do. And so that's not really a public conversation, it's more of a strategic conversation. So when you're essentially wanting to put together your campaigns, your fundraising initiatives, that sort of thing, you want to find out what users can be influential towards putting together what you want to happen. And so we'll talk about how to do that targeting in a moment. But we want to focus on, how, your list needs to also have strategy. They need to have something that you can do. So it might not be leaders in your particular case. It might be city, people in the city that you're in. It might be media, because your media is lacking right now. It might be consultants, because you need to develop an infrastructure for marketing or for fundraising. It might be for HR and recruiting. So you might be looking at candidates to help you expand your initiative. So, private lists are very, very important, because you want to be able to have that conversation with your team internally without having the public be able to view it. And then lastly, we have advocates and activists. Now, this is a different kind of list. Let's see, we're waiting for it to load. It's our biggest list. And this is a list that we're focused on so that we can really put together a crowd that will build a crowd. So these are people that we've identified as our traffic generators. Some of them are organizations. So if you look at the list, you'll be able to see that there's a wide range of people at places and things who can, we believe, can bring attention to what we're up to. Excuse me. And so we're focused on making sure that we know exactly why these people can put together the best thing. So you can see, we have a broad range of people that we want to recruit to put together the best publicity plan for what we're doing. So when you think about, your audience, you also want to think about influencers. So our goal, for example, is to export this list and put together a list of their followers and then see who's effective within their followers. So we have to make sure that we understand not just who the influencers are, but who their influencers are and who their most effective audience members are. And that's how we begin to refine and define the list so that it makes the most sense. Okay, so do we have any questions before we go into the data portion of the event, of the webinar? Do you have any questions? We're going to go into a different type of subject here. Okay. Let's see who we have. We have Jackie. Okay, Jackie, I'm trying to open your question here. I think that's from the old question. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions here. Okay, so we talked about everything being everything. And what that means is that all platforms, regardless of whether it's Twitter, Facebook, the web, Google, Pinterest, run on words. And the king of words is Google. And so Google essentially has a thing called a keyword finder. So if any of you guys have ever done Google AdWords or if you've done SEO campaigns, you'll see that essentially what we have is a tool to be able to discover what it is that your audience is actually talking about, searching, wanting, liking. So in our list, we've done two different, we've missed two different areas, and there's two different areas that we need to develop. Jackie, I'll get back to your question in 1 second. We need to know, so the best way to explain this is you have a topic. So for example, in our list, we have not yet put together two subject matters. One is education and one is health. And in this, we need to figure out how we can target people in the education field without being too broad. How do we target people in the health field without being too broad? So both of these are big subjects. You can see here in Google, there are a lot of people searching this. So in terms of popularity, this tool shows that education and health is something that people search for. Almost 1 million people, 500,000 people towards education, almost 1 million people towards health. So when we look at these, we have to do some refinement, and we have to say, look, we can't afford to spend so much time and energy casting such a wide net. If you have a lot of money, you can cast a wide net. But as a nonprofit, as an advocate, as a community organizer, it tends to, most groups tend to not have a lot of money to environment. So as a result, we want to make sure that we put together a list that can put together, I should say, a set of keywords that generate lists that put together how to best effectively reach exactly the narrow topic in education that we're trying to reach, or the narrow topic in health, without limiting ourselves traffic-wise. So in this market, you can see we have education, we have health. Then Google has a tool, part of this AdWords tool, where you can click more like this. So we can say, okay, there's educational, which is something people search for, education news, about education. So we can look at those and say, okay, which one of those is closer to what we're talking about? So we can say, okay, the audience is looking at educational and education news. Those are pretty narrow. There's only 14,000 people per month that are looking for that particular topic. How about educational? Let's see. That's not so narrow, but it's not overly broad. Is there something that can help us identify an audience? So it's going to go ahead and load the keywords here. I'm going to give it a minute. We can see that there are educational websites, educational sites, and we can look and see, well, maybe that's not quite what we're after. So we can say, okay, well, within education, we can say special education, which is in Google. It does not delineate what's called secondary phrases or secondary words. So you have to be specific. So if you just say education, you're going to be a little broad. Now, if you say special education, which is the area that we're focused in, you're going to get something a little more narrow. So you can say, okay, maybe we're going to stick with the topic special education, because education has nearly 500,000 searches a month, but special education only has 33,000. So is that narrow enough for us to be specific, or do we need to look at words underneath there? So we're going to look at special education. So we have special education. What is special education? Special education teacher, special education resources, which is interesting. And then we'll say, okay, maybe we just stick to the topic special education. But we can also look at the health side and say, okay, well, we have health with almost 1 million searches per month. Then we have health websites, which is pretty narrow, maybe too narrow. Women's health, which is interesting but not really our topic. Health information, which is pretty narrow. So we look at that versus special education, and special education tends to have a broader audience. Then we could also look at learning disabilities. Learning disabilities is about the same as special education, so that's kind of a mid-range number, 33,000 per month, so that could be an interesting one. Because we focus on people with autism, autism spectrum versus autism. Autism is a little broad, so we can look at autism spectrum and see that there's about 40,000 people per month, so that's about a mid-range number. And then we want to focus on, see if there's anything else we can focus on. Let's see, so educational websites, too broad, too narrow, very few. And the reason why I'm saying, something narrow or broad is this is relative to the entire country. So this is not just California or just your city, this is the entire country. So if you're only looking at a few thousand per month for the entire country, there's not enough volume for you to really test things out effectively and then get to the people who are in your location. So if you look at 4,400 people, for example, that's in health websites, you're looking at that's across, 50 states plus a couple territories. So in that case, it's just spread too thin to then get into from California, and then who are those people from Los Angeles, or who are those people from Sacramento, or who are those people from San Francisco, or wherever. So we need an audience with at least tens of thousands so that you can have at least a population that you know you can experiment with, and that will lead to something when it comes to searching, because Google also searches Twitter, also searches Facebook. So we need to make sure that with the work you do on Twitter, and next week when we talk about Facebook, actually leads to something on Google and they build up over time. So we're not going to talk about search engine optimization in this series, but you want to make sure that what your work you do is effective for search engines. Okay. And then, I can answer questions about that once we're done. So here we're going to look at the things in the tens of thousands range and be able to make decisions. Next, we're going to go to Twitter, and then we're going to look at keywords on Twitter. So the same way we looked at keywords on Google, we're going to look at keywords on Twitter. So we typed in education. And when you type in the keywords into Twitter, you get a couple different options. You get the top post on Twitter. I just realized I'm not sharing. One moment. Okay, we're on Twitter. Okay, so when you go to Twitter, you have you type in education. You have the top post around education for all of Twitter. This is internationally. You have live posts and hashtags. You have accounts. You have photos. You have videos. So with all of these items, you can essentially begin to find users to follow. You can find people to conversate with via hashtag. This is kind of the same discovery process as Google, but the difference is this is where your lists come in. So when you think about your actual development, your actual targeting, and you've decided, okay, I want people who are into educational news and special education, we're going to look through this Twitter feed. We're going to look through the follower suggestions to see who has the same initiatives. Excuse me, who has the same initiative and who has the same focus. And that may take time. So you're going to make your best estimate on who is going to help you. So for example, I'm going to go here and say, okay, I want UN women as a part of my feed. Because mothers govern education, and it's potentially a way to connect. So you can see here, I can click on UN Women as a username, and I can add or remove UN Women to list. I can also tweet to them if I have an initiative right away. So we can say here, you can see my list come up, and with the list, we have the ability to begin to refine and define. So I can say education, and then I can put mothers. Now, UN Women will get a notification that I have added their Twitter feed to my Education for Mothers initiative. So what that does is that's another marketing tool to be able to alert the person who's in charge of the Twitter for UN Women that there might be a potential collaboration. There might be something that we can create together. So it's a nice marketing tool. It's almost like, hey, UN, we're doing this. Is this something? Is what we're doing of interest to you? Is what we're doing part of the UN Women's Initiative? Without having to go through, a database, find the person, find the right contact, tell the, set up meetings, have phone calls. This is what makes Twitter really amazing, is because you can instantly start following, talk to, listen, and then, you never know whose attention, you're going to get. And so in this case, we're adding UN Women to education and mothers, so to get their attention. We, at our project, got a $100,000 grant in software for our litigation by doing this exact thing. So, I can testify that it works very well. The other part is that we can also look at accounts outside of the tweets themselves, and we can follow accounts. And so when you follow accounts on Twitter, you're able to also get other suggestions of who to follow. So when we look at what Twitter is suggesting for education, we have a lot of different subjects. And Twitter is being smart, and they're identifying exactly who is in relationship to not just education, but the fact that we follow technology, the fact that we talk about prisoners and people who are incarcerated, the fact that we deal with media. So you can see there's a lot of different things in here. You can see that there's the U.S. Department of Education, there's Education Week, there's media education, business education with Financial Times, there's prisoners education, there's U.S. News education. So Twitter is really being smart in, say, for example, we see that you guys do Adobe, you do technology, so we're going to give you education at Adobe, and here's our hashtag. So you can see the hashtag that we are able to follow, and you can really get a sense of what is your market and audience talking about. So is it that with our education initiatives, are we focused on women in education like I previously suggested, or are we focused on technology and education? So for example, we can start to create a list and educate ourselves on education and technology. We can save that list, and then we can add Google to that list. We can do the same for Adobe. As UNICEF, as Dell. So when we look at this, we can really start to get clear on, okay, how do we really want to position ourselves? Are we positioning ourselves with women first? Are we positioning ourselves with technology first? Are we positioning ourselves with media first? Are we informational? Are we talking about science? Are we talking about the science of having disorders? Are we talking about, so you can see it gets very specific so that we know exactly what audience we're trying to convert. So I know that Jackie had a question about, the private list. So let's see, we can get to your question. Okay. Jackie, do you want to enter that question one more time in the question box so I can answer it? Because we're going to just go through one more example, and then we'll go through one more example, and then we'll be ready to answer your question. Okay. So just to, to lead into a similar example, in Facebook we have the same kind of interesting issue, which is how is the subject being talked about, education being talked about. And the reason why I'm talking about Facebook and a Twitter conversation is because, as I had mentioned, Twitter and Facebook feed off each other. And so as a result, when you're planning, and this is what we're talking about, knowing your audience, when we're planning, we really want to be aware of what's happening on Google, what's happening on Twitter, and what's happening on Facebook, all at the same time. because when you look at narrowing down, you want to be able to say, okay, I'm going to make this choice for my Twitter list, knowing that it affects my Facebook list, knowing that it affects my Google keywords. So this planning exercise, and I'm happy to follow up with you guys on planning, is to put together, okay, not sure how the private conversation works, okay. It's to put together the most effective, really, so I guess I should say, so you don't shoot yourself in the foot is really the best way to explain it. We want to make sure that you have an idea of how your universe on each platform is going to work before you start to implement anything on one particular platform. So when we look at education, for example, on the U.S. Department of Education's website or Facebook page, you know, we're going to see when we like something, you know, Facebook is going to provide other websites or other Facebook pages that relate to that Facebook page. So just like you're making your list in Twitter, you want to make your list in Facebook with these suggestions, and you want to see what other suggestions are like the pages that that you like in Facebook, because those Facebook pages also have Twitter pages, and those Twitter pages also have websites. So we want to make sure that, you know, there's really a opportunity to be synergistic, to work in harmony, to make sure that you're not fighting, your targeting is not fighting for attention, different kinds of attention on Facebook than is on Twitter. And strategically, you know, the polar opposite of that is you can do it so that your Facebook is different than your Twitter. But in the beginning, when you're developing these strategies, I don't recommend that you develop different strategies for your Google, your Facebook, and your Twitter. It just gets very complicated, and it can get very expensive. So you want to make sure that you're in harmony. So if you have this list on Facebook and then your list on Twitter, you want to double check and reconcile your list. And again, that's a process. So I'm happy to take follow-up sessions with you guys in terms of the process. But you want to make sure that everything matches up in a way so that, again, you can be effective and your audience can know who you are and what you stand for at any given time period. So just to show you as an example, in health, you know, it's the same thing. You know, we're going to talk, you know, it's the same type of thing. You want to narrow your audience. So any keyword that you could think of is going to be a keyword that's going to yield different types of results in subcategories. So in health, you see we have tips, we have different things like that, and you want to think about your list. And then, again, you want to check it in Facebook. So if we go through and, you know, I type in health, for example, in just my regular Facebook page as a keyword. We're going to see the exact same kind of results that you get in Twitter, where you have different kinds of search opportunities. You're going to see, you know, I would say there's two different types of searches in Facebook. One is just health, where it's keyword-based. The other is by group. So you can see here there's a top, okay, interesting. Okay, so you can see that there is there's sort of people, places, pages, things, that sort of thing, and that there are different types of pages that you can like. So you can take the approach where you can search the pages that you like, or you can take the approach to where you can just do a general keyword search and begin to create lists. Now, Facebook doesn't let you make lists, so you have to make notes in, for example, Word doc or in an Excel spreadsheet or in a notepad form, so that you know exactly where these sites are, what their URLs are. You can right-click and copy URL addresses. So things like that. So this planning session of who you're targeting is, again, something you have to do on Facebook, on Google, on Twitter, so that when you begin to post on Twitter, you start generating the traffic, you're not shooting yourself in the foot. Okay. So we're going to get to Jackie's question here. The rest of the webinar, I'm going to run through some basic tools. And with those tools, and again, I could follow up with you guys on tools, but with those tools, we want to make sure that, when we look at the back end, behind the scenes of social media, so we've been talking about the front end so far, so we're talking about going to Twitter from the user side, which is your user profile, your Twitter page, and the Facebook side from your Facebook page, your Facebook profile. Those are specific types of searches. Now, behind the scenes, there are other things that relate to data. So what we're going to talk about is how to essentially, very briefly, how to really get behind, access what's called the API, and that stands for Application Programming Interface. And not to get overly technical, but what that is that is Twitter and Facebook without the front-end design of Twitter and Facebook. And so the best way to say that is that if you're building a house, you have a house, you have the outside, you have the living room, you have the furniture. That's what the user interface is for Facebook and Twitter. And then you have the frame. You have the plumbing, you have the sewer system, you have the gas, you have the electric. That's what the API is for Twitter and Facebook. So the API is like the plumbing. It's like the stuff that helps you be able to recognize exactly what it is that that your audience is about. And again, I know that can be confusing. We're going to talk about all this stuff over and over again over the 6 weeks. But basically, there are words that your audience uses. There are accounts that your audience follows. And so when we deal with the particulars of these platforms, we're going to talk about, how to recruit people for your campaign. So once you have all of the sites you want to do, you can, for example, what's called follow the followers. You can begin to participate in the hashtags of the list that you've created. You can tweet, you can retweet, you can find the corresponding Facebook page, like, share, and retweet. And you can also do what's called setting up a blog feed. So once you know exactly where you want to be, you can put together you can actually start to interact on the campaign. So this is a tool I'm going to show here called Refollow. And it's just one of many tools. But essentially, when we started our campaign to begin to recruit people and see who was interested, and this is one of many tools we used, we put together a list of accounts. So we had two accounts that I was most interested in. One was Prison Legal News, and the other was Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. And so we put together just a basic what's called a follow back campaign, and I entered, anybody who's following Prison Legal News, let me follow a sample and see who follows back. And that's what's called a recruitment campaign, because in Twitter, the standard MO is if you follow somebody, they're expected to follow you back. And if they don't follow you back, they're not interested. If they follow you back, they're interested. So it's like signing up for an email list. So follow and follow back are the #1 thing. And then the higher the follow back rate, the more successful, the more on target you are. So that's why you want to make your list very specific, because you want to test out who exactly can follow you, who exactly follows you back, who exactly follows you, what hashtags are actually working, which hashtags are not working. So you can see here we ran just a few tests in refollow. We want to be using a different tool for other things, for some of the other ones. But essentially you can see here, you know, we put together a basic thought pattern of, you know, how many followers, do they speak English, you know, making sure they have the right, they have a picture, that sort of stuff. And then we followed a sample to see who was there. So we have a high affinity with prison legal news is one of the things that happened. We don't have a high follow back for social justice because how we're articulating, presenting ourselves is not really social justice focused. So we can change our page and do a campaign that might focus on social justice and try that experiment again. But right now, as we're at how we are right now, how we state our website, how our Twitter looks, it's going to be, it has a higher affinity with prison legal news. And then once we follow those people, we want to create tweets. So we want to create tweets that are around our, either around our particular subject or around our general audience's interest, and we want to see what people are clicking on, what they're viewing, and so I'll be showing reports around that in a second. But we want to focus on, like, okay, police brutality is one thing. Okay, what else is happening? We have people with autism. We have high school suspensions. We have a lot of different things that are systemically related to what we're interested in, and what our philosophy is, what our position is. So we're sending out all kinds of tweets and posts on Facebook that are related to what it is that we're talking about or what it is we're related to. And then we're measuring our audience's responses to those particular tweets. So in this particular tool called Sprout Social, you can schedule tweets, you can schedule blog feeds, you can do all that stuff. And if you guys want to get set up with Sprout, we can certainly get you set up as well. And we have an account, so we can have you test out things on our account if you want to try things out. We have a certain schedule of tweets every single day. In queues, we have what's called a share button. So anything that I find on the web or anything, you know, one of my volunteers finds on the web, we can put together, we can go down the website and then click the Sprout Social button. It'll automatically load into our queue. It'll automatically schedule it on Twitter and Facebook. It'll schedule it on whatever site is loaded into our account. And then once we have the people that we're following and refollowing, we have reports that we can generate. And then once we have our tweets, we have reports we can generate on that. So, for example, we've been following and refollowing for, I guess, about 60 days. It shows essentially how many new followers, how many people we followed, our mentions, our tweets, our clicks, all that fun stuff. We can also see how much conversation we're having, how many updates, how much influence we have. And again, we'll talk about these statistics. You know, week 6 we'll get really into the statistics of things, but this is just to show you an overview of the types of statistics you can get with Twitter. We can also get back end of demographics. So in terms of getting into your fundraising and your campaigns and that sort of stuff, we have age ranges, we have male and female demographics, so you can see, because initially we've been recruiting around incarceration, most of our followers are male. That may change as the campaigns change and as we have different focuses, but right now we're 65% male and 35% female. And then here you can see from when we got started to how many mentions and retweets and things. And then you can also look at the date. And you can also see how many photo links we've had, how many tweets we've had, that sort of thing. So it's to tell you basically, you know, how your outbound content is doing and what makes it most effective. In Sprout, you can also export these, and you can do fancier things, which I'll also touch upon briefly. The other thing we can do is look at sent messages. And we can see, for example, who clicked, who didn't, why they clicked, what was most important, what were the reaches, that sort of thing. So we'll let this load. We'll give it a minute. Each tweet you can look at, for example, the first thing you can look at is what's called reach. You can look at clicks. You can look at clicks. You can look at response. You can look at reach. You can look at what specific links got sent out and why. So, for example, if we look at reach. So this week from May 17th to May 20th, we can look at exactly what type of audience did we generate and why, and how many responses did we have. So you can see on the side panel we have clicks with how many clicks were generated in total. So that's the entire universe of things that we're doing and what were the popular links. We can also look at reach, how many different people were reached and you know, based on retweets, and how many responses we have. So you can see here on the mass incarceration tweet, we had one response, but that response was reached out to 6,687 people because it was retweeted by this particular user. And then this user is a magazine, is a media magazine, so that really works for us. Even though it was one response, that one response was a media person who's focused on urban youth with disabilities. So that's a person that we can add to our list and put on here for that we can start to recruit for support and count on for support. So that's why you want to send out different kinds of things to see what's going to be the best opportunities for you and what is it based on. So even though this particular tweet was not about disabilities, a disabilities advocate tweeted it out. So that's an example of a connection that gets it the same way that we get it. So they're not so logical in the sense of that it's not about disability, so I'm not going to tweet about it. Well, mass incarceration relates to people with disabilities. So the Ideal magazine gets that same philosophy that we get. So we can message them, we can talk to them, we can add them to a list, we can create tasks around them, that sort of thing. So that's where this behind the scenes part really becomes effective, because once you have your targets and once you have your messages set up and once you know exactly what is going to really work, then you can really start to take your campaigns and convert them. And convert them means getting people to do what you want them to do. Whether it's fundraising, whether it's you know, putting together, having them attend events or whatever, you can gather your list, gather your advocates, gather the people who are retweeting you, gather their audiences by refollowing and following, and putting together a campaign so that you have a landing page, you have scheduled tweets, you have queue tweets, you have a newsletter, you have pictures, you have a goal page, and then you can keep looking and measuring to refine and define exactly who's on your team. The next thing we're going to do is talk about demographics. And so we talked a little bit about how exactly we have, 65% male and ages and things. We can also measure city, state, and country. We can do, how often they click and they tweet. But the other thing we can do when we access the API, the plumbing behind social media, is we can look at exactly who these people are. So what I've done here is loaded one of our lists. So we talked about the list that we have called Change Agents. And this is another tool where you can manage lists. There are tools we can talk about all day. There are lots and lots of tools, but we'll get into how to manage those towards the last week. So you can see here that in this tool we have who is in this list, who exactly they are, how many followers they have. We can sort them by how many followers they have. So that becomes really important towards planning. Because with that planning, you can say, okay, I want the people with the most followers and the most relevant. So we can start to go, okay, you have their followers, you have, are they active? Have they tweeted recently? And what do they say in their profile? Who are they? And begin to take this list and we can make sub-lists. We can ask them for their email addresses in direct messaging. We can do a few different things to begin to see, okay, maybe we want to do this with this person versus this person and this person and that person, and so go into it and then start to look at their tweets and things like that. So with Electoral, with other tools, you can export this list into a spreadsheet. You can take that spreadsheet information and start putting together effective planning. You can put together reports. So, for example, here's a reporting system that I developed in my actual social media engineering life. So, for example, when we talk about keywords and that sort of thing, you can actually measure, for example, when these particular people, so say, for example, you've created a list around advocacy in your area, and you have an advocacy list. You can actually search for where are they, what's the top source they're in, and when are they most active. So you can see, for example, this client is a plumbing and air client, and they want to know where are they, going to be online. So they have a very active group in the do-it-yourself. That's what DIY stands for. And that's the highest number of samples that we found out of all the different groups. And so their top source is Twitter, and those people are most active during 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Tuesday from the week that we measured it. So that is really specific. So, for example, in your group, you can get so specific down to, okay, my media people are on Mondays at 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. because that's when they look for their stories. My change agents are on 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. because they go there after work. And then they talk about what they talk about, and then they go back to work. So those are the things that you can look at and try to understand, so that you can say, hey, okay, I want to target these people. This is the day of the week. This is the time. Here's who they are. Here's when they work. Here's when they live. Here's when they talk. Here's when they socialize, whatever it is, and then begin to know that you're actually reaching them effectively. The feedback stats on the reports I showed you on Sprout Social will show that, but the data that you gather on those audiences using different tools with Twitter in particular, but also with Facebook with the web, you're going to see exactly when, why, how, what days of the week. Sprout Social gives us that data. A lot of different tools give that kind of data. So you want to make sure that you have, you're clear on who. You really have a model of what's going to be effective. And how you do that is making those lists, downloading your users, finding those conversations, seeing when they do what they do, and then making your campaigns and planning, creating your priorities. Okay, so that's the first day. So, you know, again, just to summarize, we talk about discovering your audiences and your priorities. Discover your audience's priorities and interests. You want to speak to what they're talking about. You want to develop your services, your initiatives, your fundraising to speak to your audience based on what they're speaking about. You also want to capture information to nurture the relationships with your audiences. So all of the tools and things I've been talking about, that really is the overall goal, is to be in the watering hole, so to speak, of your audience. And so, like I said, you know, I know that can be overwhelming, and you know, it's a whole thing. But yes, you know, I will send out the slides for you guys so that and send out the recording to you guys so you can look at this, listen to it, think about it until next week's session, because it really is a whole specific, you know, area for you to put together a plan. And so, you know, it takes thought, it takes planning. You can't just sort of hockey stick your way into it. And you really have to measure. You really have to measure your clicks, your retweets, your Twitter reads, your likes, your shares, your email list, your Facebook account, your webpage. So it doesn't, you know, I know it sounds like a lot. It doesn't have to be a full-time conversation, because the tools that you use and the tools that you choose can really make this very easy once they're set up. Now, there is effort to set it up. So you don't have to, you know, manage it every day, all day, because these are robots, and the robots kind of go by themselves. But you do have to set it up properly so that it does work, and so that you do get those automatic emails, and you do get those signups, and you do get those things. So, you know, most of the time, you know, I work on legal advocacy projects very part-time, and we've gathered, you know, the attention, for example, of Al Sharpton. We've gathered the attention of members of Parliament and Congress, Parliament in Canada and Congress in the U.S. You know, we've done a lot of amazing work, and it's just really been from planning effectively. We got our donation in software. You know, we're you know, getting very active in different events, and that's just from making sure that our Twitter lists are put together properly, making sure that we know who the influencers are at any given moment. It's the same way that I find work professionally. I mean, when I talk about these things, I live it. So, you know, and it allows me to do things like help my mother out and participate in my child's school events and that sort of stuff. So don't get overwhelmed by being able to do it. You just have to really do your homework. You have to figure out who you're trying to reach. You have to figure out your audiences. You have to really do that planning step so that once you start with Twitter, you can then build that up to Facebook, and then build that up to Pinterest, and then build that up to the next thing and next thing, and then measure the data, look at the report. And once you have that set up, you just feed the data in, and it's available to you, and it's available to your board members, and it's available to other people you work with, and it's available to your fundraisers. It's available to the crowdsourcing sites and the crowd fundraising sites. So you have the ability to create your own platform. It's just a matter of making sure you do it right the first time. And if you haven't done it right the first time, when you do it over, you don't have to do it over and over and over and over again. So that's basically it. I think I will send out an email to each of you so that you can ask, I'm sure there are lots of questions. You can ask as many questions as you need to ask, and I'm happy to answer them. I'll set up a chat on Facebook for the event, and I'll make sure you guys are all invited to that. And then we can talk about whatever you guys want to ask, because, like I said, it will take time to think through these things, and it will take time for you to kind of say, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. Now, how exactly do I do that? So we want to make sure, and I want to make sure that those questions are answered, and that if there's resources as far as tools or any type of database or any type of thing, you try to translate from your paper Rolodex system to this system, please let me know. I'm happy to be of assistance. This is part of my volunteer work. It's part of what we're doing, Legal Advocacy Project, because when you're strong, we're all strong. So I want to make sure that nonprofits have the ability, and advocates have the ability, to put together the right plans and the right opportunities. So I think we're running a little bit over time, but if anyone has one or two quick questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you guys need to jump off, I'm happy to talk to you guys online or on Facebook. So any questions before we log off here? Anything quick? Okay. I don't think we have anything here. Anything quick? Nope. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining the webinar, and I really appreciate your time, because like I said, when we all know what we're doing, we're all stronger, and we all can get the message out and create what we want to create, which is change. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I look forward to talking to each of you soon, and on Facebook with any questions you guys might have. Okay, have a great day. Thank you.